Welcome to Microdose Psychedelic Insights, powered by the Conscious Fund. This is the Incognito series, casual psychedelic conversations on cognitive liberty.
All right. We're here. We're on another episode of Incognito. We're here with Kim Adams, and we're doing a re-record because my internet did not participate last time.
And fingers crossed this time.
Fingers crossed. Kim, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Kim Adams. I'm coming from Nashville, Tennessee right now. I just moved here from the Bay Area of California. And I have, where should I begin? Let's see. I've been working in psychedelics professionally, technically, I guess, for 3 years, but working with medicines for about 7 or 8 now, I think. And I currently am developing a platform to connect people to the vetted psychedelic therapeutics for addiction. So there's a number of people who are out there, and I've been working with several of them for a while, and want people to be able to find the right mature, well-vetted resources for their addiction recovery while using psychedelics, and before and after, because that's really the kicker. Is that, to me, psychedelics just open a door. So it's really the before and after care that is really important. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also in...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm in marketing. Technically, that's one of my things that I've done for a number of years. I've done all kinds of business, but I use my powers for marketing for good. So
nice. And so what have you done in the past? Like, what drew you to the psychedelic space? What was your journey into the realm of psychedelic business?
Personally or professionally?
Both. I think the answer is both, right?
Okay, sure. So we'll go personally. I lost my mom about 10 years ago and was curious where she went, and wasn't really getting a lot of answers. Don't have a spiritual discipline, was never religious, so I didn't have a lot. I was reaching, I was grasping, and I found ayahuasca, and it offered a lot of it completely turned me on my side, head, all over, 360. I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, and I had done, mushrooms and LSD when I was younger, but that was definitely not in the therapeutic way. And so I approached it from, what can I learn? And it gave me more than I could have ever asked for. And it supported me through ayahuasca specifically, but also working with some other psychedelics, supported me through alcohol recovery as well. So I've gone through down that path, and have a lot of alcoholism in my family, and wish that many of my family members would have had that option. So that's kind of personally, but professionally, I went to a mushroom growing workshop, and I met up with some very wonderful, randomly placed humans in the Bay Area. That there's some really great people who have been working for a long time trying to reorganize and organize the psychedelic education scene. And there is something called the Psychedelic Society, which it started in San Francisco, but it, unfortunately, the founder passed away a number of years ago, and so it had gone dormant. And that day at the mushroom workshop, met some cool people who, the next day there was going to be the re-enlivening of the Psychedelic Society, and I got invited, and so I came and ended up meeting some great people, and we got it going again. It's now Danielle Nigrin is running it now. We got it going about 3 years ago, and it's been going strong ever since. And there is a really strong slant to addiction recovery because of her experience as well with psychedelics. So a lot of education, a lot of wonderful people. I was shocked at when there was probably, 100 people at that first meeting in San Francisco in a co-working space, and 99.9% of them were there because they were seeking therapeutic relationships with the plants. And I was expecting it, because it was San Francisco, to be, like people just there to talk about blowing their minds, but no, they were there for therapeutic purposes.
And that's really fascinating about the, the line of work that you're in. I mean, my mom and my uncle were alcoholics as well. So, I understand that, addiction in the family, and it's kind of funny to think that, now with this new advent of psychedelic medicine, you're going to have this, you're really going to have to communicate this dichotomy of like, okay, yes, there's other drugs, and they might have been, given a different light in the past, but here's how they're, bringing us into the future and helping people heal. So what's kind of your process in really explaining that and trying to help people come to terms with, what is a quote unquote good and bad drug?
I mean, that goes back to the drug war, honestly. My eyes were opened by Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. If you've ever read that or heard anything about it, he cataloged the drug war. And really, when you look at why it happened because Prohibition was over. Prohibition had an army that was fighting alcohol, evil alcohol. And really, when you look at it, alcohol had been in a very low dose wine, lower dose per glass for a very long time until it became illegal. As soon as it became illegal, then it had to be distilled down because that was transport purposes, because it was illegal. You needed to get the biggest bang for your buck. And what happened with the drug war was the exact same thing. Was as soon as Prohibition was over, they had an army that was all of a sudden out of work. And so they were like, drugs, they're bad. And then they started getting concentrated. And so it's not just that we as human beings have the capacity to become addicted to something. There was something that was presented to people that at one point came in much more concentrated. And then opioids came in so much more concentrated. And the pharmaceutical industries made them widely available. And so it's really about a question of, let's take a look at what happened at the level of how they were delivered and recognize that these substances at one point had some kind of therapeutic purpose. All of them did. Opium did, alcohol even did, because it was something that it was a celebratory substance and was much lower dose. If you look at what's happening in psychedelics, if you look at the actual plants themselves, they offer a lot of value. And it's a matter of sort of turning that part of your brain off, saying, just say no to drugs. Like the Reagan era just battered, and you're a little younger, so you weren't battered by that, but I was. It was just say no, just say no. And it got carried forward. But
and my parents were battered with that messaging, and I definitely received the downstream effects of it, right? Like, no, they're all bad. Stay away.
Right. And so it's a matter of really coming to terms with the fact that we've been fed something that was outside of our control, and we got to look at how these plants inherently have value and look at it from that perspective, rather than, oh, it's a Schedule I drug. Yes, that became part of the drug war, because they decided, nope, we have to make sure all of these things that change your consciousness are illegal. Because yes, some people do stupid things. People do stupid things in cars too, but those are legal. Like there's a lot of things that are available to hurt other people and hurt yourself that are still completely legal.
You just make laws around those things to ensure safety. Like, there's It's a funny Joe Rogan quote, like, cheeseburgers can be lethal, but you don't go and ban cheeseburgers. You just, don't abuse cheeseburgers.
Exactly. Cheeseburgers. So yeah, it's really, and most of the time, people who are coming to psychedelics for addiction recovery, they've already tried everything else. The addiction system is broken. The recovery system, I should say, is broken. The addiction system's
it's on fire. Oh yeah, no, you're good there.
Yeah, it works just fine. Yeah, but it's really the recovery.
If you're looking at recovery and the potential for these medicines to actually have a real impact on helping humans that don't have many other options, where do you see the most promise?
Well, so where's the biggest problems really is what it comes down to, and what's going to become available first. What's already available in other countries, Mexico, everything is available, but it's a matter of finding the right people who can help you. The problem that I've witnessed since COVID started is the blatant increase of alcohol, and not only the use of alcohol, the sales of alcohol went up 25% within the first few months of COVID. There are, all of a sudden a lot of, late night talk show hosts, I won't mention their names, but they're drinking on the air. There's people who are just promoting intoxication. And I'm not one to say shame on you for being intoxicated. I am definitely be aware of what you're doing by showing your actions. Just be in integrity and recognize that you are standing up for people and they're watching your behaviors. So in terms of what the biggest promise is, alcoholism is going to skyrocket. The opioid epidemic has already been well cataloged, and it wasn't specifically the Sackler family, but there was a huge judgment that just came through.
Wasn't it the Purdue family for OxyContin?
Yeah, they just got fined, was it
$7 billion? Yeah, $8 billion.
So, and unfortunately, I mean, COVID and the elections, and there's been plenty of news cycles in the US, but the opioid crisis has kind of gone a little bit underground because people are, there's a lot of other things happening. But once some of the smoke clears, the people who have those problems maybe had addressed them, may have started them again. And I think that people who may or may not have had a light drinking problem will have a much more serious problem that needs to be addressed. And what are the things that can address that? To be completely clear, there is no magic bullet. There's no one time you're going to be fixed because you took this one psychedelic. Psychedelics, the reason why they're so incredible is because they open the doorway to help you to understand. And I was speaking to a counselor in LA week before, and he's been in drug and alcohol counseling professionally for about 10 years in the traditional system. And he's moved away, I won't say his name, but he's moved away from the traditional system and has been working with psilocybin to help people with various addictions, because it's the safest in terms of contraindications against pharmaceuticals, and also just physically, it's very safe. And it gives insight. It gives insight very quickly, and it also is kind of like a sweet, it delivers it sweetly. If you are someone who has a really severe opioid problem, you may not need a sweet delivery. You may need somebody to slap you around a little bit and be like, knock it off, which is exactly what Ibogaine does. Will they cure you the first time? Absolutely not. But they offer an insight, and Ibogaine has the incredible benefit of the fact that it helps to reset the opioid receptors. So you're actually going to be technically physically clean from your physical addiction at the end of your treatment. But then the work begins. Then you have to decide how you want to live life.
Yeah, and it's I guess they help you do the work in a sense. It's like, a vitamin's not going to make you healthy, but it's part of the puzzle that contributes to your overall health.
Right, and supplementation and understanding nutrition is a huge part of addiction, especially if you have an alcohol problem, because it just leaches everything out of your system.
Yeah,
so you have to
super deficient.
Yeah, and people don't realize that depression and anxiety can be greatly helped by nutritional supplements and a better diet, but they just don't know how, because it's fairly new territory, or rather I'll say that the FDA will not support it, so therefore you're not educated on it.
Wild, wild west territory.
Yes.
So the topic of sustainability, maybe we'll just quickly touch on that. So I kind of just leave it in broad terms. When I say that, what comes to mind? And it can be in the psychedelic space or just even in general in your life.
So it's such a broad question. When I think of sustainability in the psychedelic realm, I think of what is sustainable for an organism, and what's going to help people long term, and also what plants can be sustainable, like quite literally, in supporting human evolution and the evolution of consciousness. And I mean, psilocybin wins, and that's why it has been studied so much, because you can grow a crop in a few weeks, whereas ibogaine is a root, and you have to wait for the whole plant to grow. Ayahuasca is incredibly it's because ayahuasca is a combination of two plants. There's so many variables that it's really hard to truly study, because even if you have the exact same brew and it's sat for a little bit longer, it's fermented, or it's sort of created a new, it's got a metamorphosis that it goes through. So it
like an entourage effect almost, right?
Kind of. I've used ayahuasca a number of times, and I drank the exact same batch weeks later, and even actually the same batch the next day, and it changes, your body's reaction changes to it. And I'm not going to say that psilocybin is totally predictable, because it is not. I don't care what happens with people distilling it and creating, just pulling out the psilocybin, and that's it. It still is going to interact with the human body in different ways, but it can be reproduced really quickly. And in terms of it being sustainable in the human system, it comes in and goes out very fast. I was watching something the other day. It was a silly thing, but it was Paul Stamets talking about telling some folks that, just remember, if you eat too many, in 4 hours it'll be gone. And so they ate too many, and they looked at each other and they were like, okay, let's set a timer, because in 4 hours we'll be okay.
That's an
I love that situation, but there isn't, to my knowledge, there's no deaths associated with psilocybin. There are with ibogaine, because it has quite a bit, it has a lot of physical issues, particularly with the heart. The cardiac rhythms are
interesting. Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure somewhere along the line there's probably been a death attributed to a reaction, but not a physical toxicity break from the mushrooms, but there's always risks, and there's always dangers and downsides to these things. So it's important to not underplay that, and be sure you're having transparent conversations about that, right?
I completely agree. I would like to point out how many deaths are associated with pharmaceuticals, though, that are not spoken about. That's really that's my personal vendetta, because my mother died because of poor treatment with the pharmaceuticals she was given. She had a weakened system, but if someone was monitoring it properly, it would have been different. So there's a lot of things you have to consider when you're looking at an alternative treatment, yeah, it's an alternative, but it's an alternative to something that has a pretty crappy track record. And I've witnessed so many people, speaking of sustainability, most of the people who've been through addiction recovery centers have done it 7 or 8 times. They could have gone to college, a really nice college, twice.
For that amount of money.
They've for that amount of money. Yeah. And that is not sustainable for your family, for you. I don't care how much money you make. It's not. And I came from the Bay Area, where the tech community's deep, dark secret, which is not really a secret, is their amphetamine abuse. And in terms of, not Ritalin, what is it?
Adderall and Ritalin and
Adderall.
Concerta, 5
Yeah.
Ams.
Yeah.
Don't know anything about that.
Yeah. Well, I've witnessed it, and I've witnessed it because of the tech startup world, right? Like,
of course, yeah, hustle culture.
Yeah, just get it done. Just get it done. What is the cost of that 25-year-old who hasn't slept for 2 weeks, long-term for them? I don't care if you made the most successful product in the world. You're going to have to pay the piper at some point, whether it be an addiction problem or just a physical depletion problem. That makes me, I could go on forever though.
Totally fair. We don't have forever, but we'll always be talking, we're always on a call at some point. So the third little pillar of this podcast is the art of being incognito, and that's kind of where the name comes from, which is the philosophical principle that one's existence is demonstrated by the fact that one thinks. And the other one is the intellectual process of the self or the ego. So how does, understanding the way you think impact your day-to-day life? Like, just the art of really like putting the ego aside and fundamentally knowing who you are.
Yeah. Oh, just such an easy question. Fine, Patrick, it's cool. It's, it's
solve the world's problems.
Fine. So I have a degree in psychology. I went to school at Sonoma State, where we basically it was a philosophy degree, honestly, that masqueraded as a psychology degree, because it was a bunch of, I got so lucky, and I had no idea what psychology really looked like when I left that school, because all of my professors were old psychonauts. They had been some of the people who went through the MDMA trials and the LSD trials and were part of that world, and then grew up and went to become professors at this school. So the nature of thinking is, of course, everything we talked about, how people conceptualize the world. And they came from the perspective, because it was a humanistic school, that it's something that you can observe, and there's things from the outside that can give you insight, and there's relationships that can give you insight, but ultimately it has to pass through your filters. And I think some of the most profound experiences that I've had have been really, really low dose in a therapeutic setting of psilocybin and even ayahuasca, although ayahuasca doesn't really offer low doses. Like it kind of does whatever it's going to do that day. But
the go dose.
It let my filters, it let my filters be different. Sometimes they fall away. Sometimes they morph. But I've never been worse off for having my filters change, because we all come into this world with, you see the world through the lens of your family at the beginning. You see your mother and your father, they say, this is a strawberry. Here is a strawberry. Maybe years later, you might find that was actually an apple, but you didn't know that for a long time. There's perception, that your family gives you. And then you start to absorb some of the perceptions and filters, and especially just moving to Nashville from California, where I resided my entire life, oh, I've got some different perceptions than the people here. And I've good and bad, you know, especially in the Bay Area, the value of personal time and the value of family time, it's just null and void there. Here, people are like, no, I'm going home because we have family dinner. And I'm like, whoa. It's just not a thing that's valued in that culture there. Yeah. And so it's really, you know, if you change your mind, you change most everything. And if you recognize that your mind is deficient in some way, I'm not going to use the word deficient, but if you're nutritionally or potentially psychologically didn't have what you needed, and again, I'm not going to say psychedelics are going to give that to you, but they may give you insight. There's been a few times where I have just sat up in the middle of an ayahuasca ceremony and said, I need to start eating meat. I need to eat red meat. And that was like clear as day. That was information that I hadn't eaten red meat since I was 12. And I started in the last couple of years.
And you're just like, let's fix that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I didn't need ayahuasca for that one, but you know, I'll keep that in mind if I ever do.
It's hard in California. You definitely get beaten by the vegan, vegetarian stick over and over. So
yeah, well, that's kind of counterintuitive now, isn't it? Cannibalism to solve that. Just kidding. I'm just playing. So that's really fascinating. And how, like, have you had a couple different iterations of how you've been involved in the psychedelic industry, and kind of, you know, those journeys and realizations have shifted your path, or has it always been in this, you know, linear direction towards helping people with addiction?
No, definitely not. I was not addressing my addiction for a number of years. I was covertly. I wasn't, because I wasn't what people consider an alcoholic. I was really high functioning. I worked too many hours, and that was the only way I understood how to unwind. And I think people, when I told people that I stopped drinking, they were like, oh, okay. You know, like it wasn't like, oh, thank God you finally stopped drinking. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. We don't have to go to a bar or whatever. But it was significant to me because I have so much alcoholism in my family. So I was like, this needs to change. But for, you know, the first 4 years of me sitting with ayahuasca and other psychedelics, I was just kind of, I would do it long enough I would not drink long enough in order to be able to sit with ayahuasca, because you can't have alcohol in your system. But I sort of sidestepped a lot. So it wasn't a focus in the beginning. I like I said, I kind of fell into helping the Psychedelic Society get up and running again. And then I've consulted for a number of different kinds of businesses, whether it be marketing or business structure. So I started consulting for a co-working space that wanted to be a place to house psychedelic trials. And so I started to learn about psychedelic trials. I wasn't really focused in that world, but I started to look at it. And then that out of that space, and also some other relationships, the Decriminalize Nature movement was born in Oakland. And so I was part of that crew. And I definitely am not a political leaning person, but it was, you know, this is a way to make this more accessible for people who need it. And then I started to come to terms with, I do need it. I do need to look at this, and I need to address this head on, and I need to completely stop drinking. And so I started looking around, and I started seeing people who would use psychedelics for addiction recovery. And it started to unfold. And really, truly, I'm not an expert in it. I've had the experience of it. I'm certainly not an expert, but I have found experts that have been doing this for a decade. And I'm trying to make underground, mind you, and quietly. And I'm trying to make what they've been doing accessible to other people, because, like I said, I do marketing for the betterment of people and just helping people find what they're needing. That's what I'm after. So it's definitely evolved. Definitely.
you're an expert at that, and helping people is the main goal of this industry. So I think you're doing fantastic work, and appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was really fun having you for a recording and learning more about what you're doing in the space. As we sort of sign off, do you want to maybe give any final words that you'd like to share, and tell the audience where they could find you if they want to connect?
Sure. Well, I didn't get to ask you any questions, so I am curious.
Well, you're gonna have to start a podcast then. I'm just kidding.
No, but I am curious. One, just if you could share one wonderful aha moment that you've had as a result, whether it was recreational or therapeutic, just with your experiences with
I don't know if I've had any really profound experiences that have altered and changed my perception, or anything that's really changed my behavior. But I think the first time I tried psychedelics, when I went to London, I was 19 years old. 2012, Amsterdam, had a huge handful of wet
I think there's something going on with the sound. Can you hear me? Something happened with the sound.
What about now?
Yeah, you're good. It just did so none of what you said, I don't know if it was recorded.
It's the internet and it's the headphones, but it's all good. We're on the finishing stretch here. So it was really just kind of harkening back to your point of changing the way you see things, changing the way you think, maybe not changing anything immediately, but giving you kind of those cognitive tools to be able to see the world differently. And so that kind of, helped me guide towards a career in photography, and then cannabis, and then here in psychedelics, and just, pursuing what I wanted to do with cognitive liberty, right? And so I want to be able to help other people. Maybe they're at the bottom, maybe they're in the middle, and maybe they want to achieve high performance. But for me, it's about, being able to share that kind of cognitive liberty and freedom with the world.
Love it.
So if we're going to find you, what's Twitter, email, website?
Well, website is lytmind.com. So light mind. And email, you can reach me at lytmarketing@gmail. And lytmind, what it is a platform to connect to first initially free resources to find 12-step and smart recovery groups that are psychedelic friendly, so that you can start to introduce yourself to that world. And then I work with a doctor in Mexico who has been working with specifically Ibogaine aftercare and helping to rebuild the body after opioid recovery. So he's got a whole supplement line that helps to rebuild the body, rebuild the mind. And they're only available in Mexico. And so I'm trying to bring those up into the US. So I'm just launching the platform. Once you get your community, you get your mind and body sort of revved up, then you can connect out to, there's an outpatient program that is a full remote program. And then there's several other inpatient programs when those are available to travel to other countries, which in the US, it's still a little bit challenging. They're allowing people, but start your recovery from home. That's what LYT Mind is about. So yeah. Thank you so much for
laying the groundwork for the future.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Patrick. I'm so glad the internet, for the most part, worked.
For the most part. And sorry about the choppy video to everyone watching, but that's just the way she goes.
That's
Thanks
Zoom,
for coming on. We'll chat soon.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Adios.
Thanks for joining the Incognito series, brought to you by Microdose and the Conscious Fund. Visit our website at www.microdose.buzz.